Today, we're led to believe that being intelligent is the most important factor for success. Genius characters breeze through life always knowing the right thing to say at the right time. The lesson here is that if you aren't smart, it means you're fucked. But science tells us that that's actually not the case. See, as it turns out, being smart can actually make it harder for you to achieve success. So today, we're talking about why being smart can be a disadvantage, what the real factors of success are, and how we can leverage them to increase our odds of achieving it. This is Chris Langdon, and he has one of the highest IQs ever recorded at 195. For reference, Einstein's was thought to be around 160, and the average person today is anywhere between 85 and 115. So it's fair to say, he's a pretty smart dude. He was so smart in fact that he got a perfect score in his SATs despite falling asleep halfway through the exam. With that kind of brain power, you might expect that he'd be a multi-billionaire or making speeches for world peace at the UN, but instead Langdon spent most of his years being a bouncer in New York City, which isn't to say that there's anything wrong with that, but it isn't the kind of lifestyle you'd expect from the guy who had to drop out of school because he was smarter than all his professors. And this points to the first reason why being smart can set you back in life. See, when a kid's smart and they take exams, they tend to do well without even needing to try hard. But what happens when they do? Their parents start to praise the hell out of them for just how wonderful and smart and clever they are. And that sounds pretty harmless on the surface, until you really dig into what the kid's actually learning from this. The kid isn't learning that they get praise for doing well in exams. No, they're learning that they get praise when they do well in exams without them having tried, because that's what shows how smart they are. And so they become incentivized to actively not try hard and to rely on their intelligence to get by. And they can do this for a long time without having any problems until they can't anymore. School ultimately gets to the point where you need study skills in order to succeed. And by the time most of these kids realize this, it's already too late. But obviously this isn't the case for all intelligent people. I mean, there's countless examples of smart people that do extremely well in life. But again, it turns out achieving this success can actually be the most horrible outcome for people. Take Joseph Goebbels, for example. Goebbels was the propaganda minister for the Nazi Party, and he was very good at his job. He all but convinced Germany to go and fight and die for a disgusting cause, all in the name of this short, sick drug addict. But he was so good at his job that it took the Allies nearly 2 years to denazify Germany after the war. Unfortunately for him, he was too smart for his own good, and he ended up even brainwashing himself. Believe it or not, this idea is even more common today than it was back then. To demonstrate it, you might expect that smart people are less likely to fall for propaganda. Believe it or not, the opposite is actually true. Several studies show that the higher someone's IQ, the more likely they are to subscribe to crazy beliefs. Gurwinder Bogle points out in his Substack article that on one hand, it does make it easier for people to achieve goals when they're smart, but that does not mean that the goal itself is intelligent.
In 2013, the Yale law professor Dan Kahan conducted experiments testing the effect of intelligence on ideological bias. In one study, he scored people on intelligence using the cognitive reflection test, a task to measure a person's reasoning ability. He found that liberals and conservatives scored roughly equally on average, but the highest scoring individuals in both groups were the most likely to display political bias when assessing the truth of various political statements. In a further study, Kahan and a team of researchers found that test subjects who scored highest in numeracy were better able to objectively evaluate statistical data when told it related to a skin rash treatment. But when the same data was presented as relating to a polarizing subject, gun control, those who scored highest on numeracy actually exhibited the greatest bias.
With Goebbels, he was incredibly good at coming up with all of these reasons why people should believe in something that was objectively not true, but that also meant he was able to come up with the best reasons to convince himself of the same thing. In other words, the smarter someone is, the greater their ability to reason and to rationalize. But why would I convince myself to believe something that isn't true? Well, the answer is that the brains were never made to find truth. They're survival machines at the end of the day. So it's going to convince you of whatever it believes will be in your best interest to gain more status and resources in order to survive and thrive. That's why today it's so uncommon to see someone who has some right-wing beliefs and some left-wing beliefs. If you know someone's stance on one issue, you can all but predict their stances on every other issue. It also explains why people in media can seem so incredibly incredibly smart and yet so unbelievably stupid at the same time. They work in an industry where rationalizing extreme opinions has the greatest chance of getting more eyeballs, which in turn means getting more status and then more money as a result. And this gets 10 times worse when you add audience capture to the mix. When you grow an audience or a group of friends based on having one particular perspective, when you eventually do achieve success, you're then confined to continue spouting the same beliefs, otherwise you're going to lose your social circle or your very livelihood. And so it's only natural that your beliefs would start to fall in line in order to protect you. As Upton Sinclair put it is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it. Okay, so if IQ and intelligence isn't going to get us what we want, what is the biggest factor? What's the biggest thing that's going to determine whether or not you're successful? The one thing that above all else correlates with whether you yourself are going to be successful is the area code that you were born in. People born into rich areas have the greatest access to education, to resources, and to networking opportunities. This kind of sucks, and it's a bitter pill to swallow, but since none of us have time machines, as far as I'm aware, and since on this channel we like to focus on the controllables, what can we actually focus on which will increase our odds of success? Well, that is where the good news comes into play. You see, the next biggest factor that we have complete control over is your EQ, or emotional quotient. Now, your EQ is defined as the ability to understand, use, and manage your own emotions in a positive way. This makes sense if you think about it. The people who are best able to understand themselves and others are going to be the ones with the self-awareness to know what they need to do in order to fix problems. The great thing is that this can actually be trained. If you want to, the first thing that you need to do is accept that the smarter you are, the more likely it is that you've convinced yourself of some bullshit. Nobody wants to think that this is them, and right now you're probably thinking, yeah, well, I'm sure other people do this. I'm sure other people have these beliefs that are fucking crazy, but like, I would know. If it was me, I would know. But hey, dummy, that's your brain talking, and it's rationalizing, telling you that you're right. We need to accept that in order to be right in the long term, we have to be okay with being wrong in the short term. Scratch that, we need to accept that we're going to be wrong way fucking more than we're going to be right, and that that's okay. The best way to learn and improve is by focusing on having strong beliefs loosely held, not loose beliefs strongly held. The way that you can take this to the next level is by adopting an entirely new definition of learning and intelligence altogether. My favorite comes from the master of short shorts and calf raises himself, Alex Hormozi.
Learning simply means same condition, new behavior. So the same thing happens and then you respond differently. That's learning. So if I show you a red card and then I slap you, like, wow, that sucked. Then I put it back in my pocket. And then I bring out my red card again. And then I slap you. And then I bring out my red card again. You duck. You learned. Learning means same condition, new behavior. If you're presented with the same situation and you do not change how you behave, you have not learned. So that's learning. Intelligence. How fast you change what you do in the same situation. Intelligence is rate of learning, speed of learning.
To accepting new ideas, you in effect become more intelligent and get better outcomes as a result. One mistake that I made over and over and over again was not making the most of my time, which is why I've created this playlist which summarizes all of Ali Abdaal's lessons on productivity, which you can find over here.
Come on over here. Come on over here. No, you flip me off. Come on, coward. No. Come on. You're not an intellectual. You're a fake and a fraud.